Welcome to the Hot Dog Hunks podcast, where we talk our favorite food, which is, of course, the most delicious food on the planet, hot dogs. I'm Mustard Mike, and I'm here with...
Ketchup Ken.
Ketchup Ken. Holy crap, that was amazing.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about the best fast food hot dog that we've ever had in our lives. I'm going to say probably the A&W Whistle Dog, if we have to go with fast food hot dogs.
The A&W Whistle Dog is pretty good. If you consider New York fries fast food, I'd say that the New York fries chili dog is really good. Like the chili cheese dogs, I'm all about that. I don't even like chili, but I like it on hot dogs. You know?
The chili cheese dog. So how are we going to decide between those? Because I'm really thinking that mine's right, and you're thinking that yours is right. So we're going to have
this is an apples to oranges thing.
All right, I'll tell you what we do. We pull out our wieners, and whoever's bigger wins.
Well, you have a camera and I don't, so I think we're going to have to leave mine up to imagination and assume that I win, I guess.
Okay, I'm down with that.
I don't know. Wait, let's see yours before I talk big.
I mean, it is a audio medium, so you know what? We'll just give it to you for this one, and admit that this is not the Hot Dog Hunks podcast. This is in fact the Photo Friends podcast. I am your photographer, Jared Poirier, as usual. I am here with a very fine gentleman.
My name is Deven Kay, and I'll be your history consultant today.
Yes, our resident history expert, Deven, who came on here for one of my favorite episodes. One of my favorite things I've ever done in my life. One of the things that I'm most proud of that I've ever created, which is our series on Apollo 11 and the photos. And I definitely recommend checking that one out. We're not going to talk about anything related to that today. We might mention it for 5 seconds, but this is going to be a totally different thing, totally different historical voyage. What are we talking about today, Deven?
Today we're going to be talking about, it's the first part in this series about the assassination of JFK, and we'll be discussing Lee Harvey Oswald in this picture of him very candidly holding a rifle and some magazines in his backyard. Yes,
the famous, or perhaps more aptly put, infamous backyard photo of the man Lee Harvey Oswald, who was accused of killing the president. Never got to convict him.
That's fair. I feel like whether or not somebody's convicted of a crime, if there is evidence, it speaks. But it's interesting to me that he wasn't convicted in absentia or post-mortem, because that's been done historically, especially in cases where people were really riled up about something like they were about this. But I guess, that bullet really just kind of put an end to the whole thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, man. As this story shows, a bullet from anyone's gun can change history, right? I think for the worst in this case. But before we can really...
it's tough to say.
Yeah, before we can get into that in any depth, I do have to quickly thank our gracious sponsor, which is CloudSpot, the easiest way for photographers to deliver and sell their photos online. You don't take a lot of photos, Deven. You're more about the painting situation. You don't even have...
I want to take more photos. I'm just going to spring for a camera. That's all.
Yeah, I just got to get that camera thing sorted out. But when you do, you can experience beautiful galleries, grandma-proof image downloads, and custom storefronts for sales. And we've had CloudSpot as the sponsor for a little while here. They were offering something great for our listeners, which was 20% off. But I went to CloudSpot, Deven, and I said, I think we have to do something a little bit better, a little bit more special for the listeners of the Photo Friends podcast. And you know what they said, Deven?
What'd they say?
They said, Jared, 50% off to listeners of the Photo Friends podcast. Click the link in the description, hit up CloudSpot, and you can get 50% off for a whole year. That's the Photo Friends promise. All right, now we can talk about Oswald. So, what are your sources for this particular episode, bro? I think that's important.
when it came to Oswald, actually, there was a really good documentary on PBS.
Mm-hmm.
There also, I watched, there was like 2 or 3 interviews that he did publicly, and I watched those a few times over, just getting a sense of it. And other than that, I think I went to biography.com just to get the particulars of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, other than that, and looking at the photo, that was pretty much everything that I needed. I think that his life history mostly speaks for itself, as long as you accept the basic facts of it, which most people do. I mean, like, there's very few people that are so far out that they don't accept who Oswald says he was. You know, he was a Marine. He was somebody who tried defecting, who wasn't happy with it.
Yeah.
And then he was somebody who came home. And it seems to me, looking at it all, that really everything that happened in his life was because he was looking for a way to fulfill this idea that he was somehow special, or that he had some sort of special destiny to fulfill.
Yeah, I got much of the same thing, that he was kind of a bit of a loser and got rejected by a lot of different people in his life. And I think that maybe is one of the, a part of why he did what he did. As for sources on my side, just in terms of like general stuff around the case, I think that this book that I have in my hands right now, it's kind of a thick one. I didn't read the entire thing, but I read some chapters of it that were, pertinent to the podcast. An Unfinished Life by Robert Dellek, which is about John F. Kennedy. For stuff related to Lee Harvey Oswald, there's obviously the Warren Commission report, which was done basically in lieu of a trial, because Oswald got killed by Jack Ruby pretty much right away. So
I've gone through both reports.
Okay.
I would consider that I used them as sources, but they're, first of all, they're primary source material, and second of all, so many people have so many problems with both of them.
Yeah, I think just for the basic facts of Oswald's life, though, I think that they are decent.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when you get into the actual, nitty gritty of the autopsy and crap, then then it gets a little bit hairier. But in terms of general facts of the case and what Lee did leading up to it, I think it's pretty decent. And then in regard to the actual photo that we're going to be discussing, since this is a photography podcast. There's a great the backyard photo, right? There's a great YouTube video, Vox, I believe, did it, why people think this photo of JFK's killer is fake. And they actually, I
saw that one. Yeah,
it's good. It's short, it's good. It really does a good job of discussing that photo and the authenticity of that photo. And they actually had the professor or whatever, the academic that worked on that at the time. I believe he was working for Dartmouth College. So, I read...
He did such a wonderful job explaining it.
He really did. And reading through it, you don't get that. Like, I was reading through it, like the Dartmouth report and stuff like that. And I was like, man, this is really not making a lot of sense to me. And until I heard him actually explain it, then I was like, oh, okay. And that's kind of the case with a lot of more academic literature anyways. It's not really written for us, right? So, yeah.
No, it's written for experts. And a lot of the time, experts have a hard time translating those things. But he did an excellent job. Yeah. It's all very technical stuff when it comes to photos. And what it really comes down to is that the human eye and the human brain really are not actually good at discerning these things on their own. It's true. Not really, the human eye is no good at telling if a photo is real or fake.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And just so many things that can look weird in a photo that aren't necessarily weird. There's just, a lot of different variables that go into a photo. So you're absolutely right. But yeah, let's get into the story here, man. The whole thing revolves around, one event. There's a lot that we're going to discuss, but the most important thing here is, of course, what happened on November 22nd, 1963, where John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. He took a bullet to the head. Where that bullet came from, we can debate. But that part is true. People think it was Lee Harvey Oswald on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository, and he shot 3 shots at John F. Kennedy from his sniper's nest there. The whole event had far-reaching historic implications. Really changed the world. Like, people say, that word gets thrown around like, oh, this changed the world. NFTs are going to change the world, right?
Yeah, all the time.
This changed the world, man. It permanently scarred the American psyche, and just in terms of like foreign policy, domestic policy, really redirected a lot of things. I actually have a quote here that I want to start the podcast off with from this book here, Unfinished Life, if you'll indulge me. Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, right on. So here we go with the quote from Theodore Sorensen. Countless individuals have noted that the president's death affected them even more deeply than the death of their own parents. The reason, I believe, is that the latter situation most often represented a loss of the past, while the assassination of President Kennedy represented an incalculable loss of the future. So I think that's pretty good quote. Kind of sums up a lot of people's feelings on it, and just why this thing is like personal for a lot of people, I think, right?
Yeah, well, I think at the time, Kennedy represented for a lot of people a real avenue towards change. Somebody who believed in change the way that they did, and who wanted it the way that they did. And I think that if he had lived, he would have been considered a traitor to his class, the same way that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was. Somebody who came from the upper echelons of society, but who really did work for people in the lower echelons of society. Now, he wasn't as concerned with domestic policy as he was with foreign, but he clearly was concerned with the people and concerned with, the average person and how they were doing.
Yeah, in regard to like the civil rights movement and stuff, he was definitely kinder than other presidents, in terms of how he viewed that. And he spoke very eloquently on wanting to solve that issue, right? Like, we're talking about in the 60s, like, it's hard to imagine today, but literally like segregated lunch counters and crap like that, right? Like but
Johnson was going for all of those same changes, and he got them.
Right.
They may have been different under Kennedy. I don't know.
Well, you could argue that it was like Kennedy who proposed those things, and getting assassinated is what kicked it off, right? You can make that argument.
That's fair.
That was kind of Johnson repaying him for that, right?
I don't want to get too much into Kennedy and Johnson today because I have a lot to say about that.
For sure, man. But it's just to put it simply, like, if Kennedy had lived, if he had gotten another term as president, it's possible that there would have been absolutely no escalation of the war in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all of that just doesn't happen possibly under Kennedy. He even talked about, in regard to us, like personally, what we care about, what we covered, he had spoken of a joint Soviet-American space program. Kennedy actually proposed that, right? So instead
that's
of
huge cooperation.
It's crazy, man. And
one thing I will say is that I think that if Kennedy had lived, Robert Kennedy, working as he did under Kennedy, would have done a lot more great things to take apart organized crime.
Yeah.
And that's something that could have gone on for a long time, but didn't. And there's a lot to say about that too. But
for sure. And all of the like deep state, police state, like CIA assassinations and all of that, right? Maybe, maybe people can actually trust their government, continue to trust their government, And that
exactly.
That would be weird to think about.
It's crazy that in the course of less than a century, America went from like completely believing in their leaders and their democracy to like zero faith in it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reading this stuff reading into this story more, that was one thing that was definitely striking to me, man. And we all think like, oh, we know this stupid story, right? You really, until you start digging in, like there's so many details that you don't. I don't. I've been reading about it like for 20 hours at this point probably, and I still don't know it all, right?
Yeah, and I mean, what I'll say about it as somebody who studied the history of politics in the 20th century a lot, it's hard to learn any of it without learning all of it. It is just
Yeah,
so intricately tied together into
true.
this unbelievably interwoven story.
Yeah.
That kind of starts from just before the beginning of World War One and runs through it into the Depression, into World War Two, and then straight into the Cold War. There's a narrative there that passes with characters, and there's a lot that happens.
Well, hopefully we don't have to talk about all of that, but I
No,
do.
absolutely not. But if you really want to understand it all, you have to go through all that. I think.
Yeah,
On a mass scale.
yeah. To understand how like the Cold War happened, you do kind of have to know like World War One, World War Two. I would agree with that. But in terms of what we can cover here, and I think that we can do a really nice job of just breezing through all this stuff, mentioning a couple of things, to give some historical background, and then we'll get into the character of Lee Harvey Oswald himself and talk about that in some more detail. So yeah, just some stuff that happened leading up to these events, really important historical stuff. If you don't know this stuff, the rest of this isn't going to make any sense to you. The North Vietnam becoming communist under Ho Chi Minh, that happened in 1954. They were supported by the Soviet Union at the time. America is having like this overall competition with the Soviet Union, kind of two competing ways of organizing society. And with North Vietnam becoming communist, this is something that worries a lot of people, that if all of Vietnam becomes communist, what's going to happen next? Eisenhower is president at this point before Kennedy, and he talks about the domino theory and needing to prevent the like socialism taking over more and more countries, right? Yeah, that's kind of a basic idea, in so many words, of what that whole thing was all about. In terms of the Bay of Pigs invasion, do you know any stuff about that?
Yeah. So in terms of the Bay of Pigs invasion, that was an operation approved by Kennedy to support anti-Castro Cubans in an invasion of Cuba, or a specific area of Cuba. It was underfunded, undersupported, and it really didn't get anywhere, and it turned into an embarrassment for the entire administration.
Yeah, and a huge embarrassment for Allen Dulles, who was the whatever chairman, I guess, of the CIA, the head of the CIA.
Yeah.
At the time. He actually got fired over this, so it was a big thing. And one big sticking point with this Bay of Pigs, it may have actually been a success. It was like Cuban refugees that were trained and sent to make some havoc, some invasion of Cuba. America didn't provide any air support, so that was what Kennedy's power was, to say, okay, we're not doing the air support thing, and that's probably why the operation failed. Maybe it was bound to fail anyways, but that's definitely part of it, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I'm not going to speculate too much, but a lot of these anti-Castro Cubans in America were very, very extreme, and they were agitating for some sort of action. So it may be that it was going to happen anyways, whether the government wanted it to happen or not. So they just kind of said, go ahead. But either way, in the context of that whole conflict with the Cubans, that it's really worth mentioning, because that was a lot of what Lee Harvey Oswald agitated about in the context of himself being a socialist. When he was in New Orleans, he ended up in a fight publicly and then being arrested for handing out pro-Castro pamphlets in an anti-Castro neighborhood.
Yeah, the Cuban refugees, they don't like that.
Yeah, it was, it was something that he personally either cared about or chose to involve himself in.
For sure. And that, well, we can debate about that, how authentic that, his ideological views were or not. But definitely, all of these things, these historical happenings, whether they are happening all the way across the world in the Soviet Union, or they're happening, just off the shore of Florida, right? You can ride a boat to Cuba. So Yeah, it's pretty intense. And that's obviously linked to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1963. Obviously, you know about that.
Yeah, I mean, historically, it's one of those things that if you study the 20th century, you spend a bit of time on. I mean, in 1963, the Soviet Union moved some missiles into Cuba,
Mm-hmm.
and these missiles, they were nuclear, and they were capable of striking continental United States. And it triggered an embargo by the U.S. Navy, which triggered a much larger, much more tense 7-day diplomatic exchange, I guess we'll call it,
Sure.
wherein the world very nearly came to the brink, or actually came to being destroyed by nuclear weapons, where the United States and the Soviet Union almost destroyed each other.
In terms of things that are actually public, this is probably the closest it's ever come.
Yeah, exactly. That I'm aware of.
And there could have been other accidents and disasters, and maybe they covered it up, but this is one that we know about. And yeah, that's scary, and that does illustrate how high the stakes were in a lot of these things, right? Like whoever is the president of America is very important when they can push the button that ends the world. So
yeah, absolutely, and sometimes that's terrifying, as we've seen lately. But anyways, I saw a documentary once with Robert S. McNamara. And at the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, they did get the Soviets to take the missiles out of Cuba. And he was given a plaque, which was a golden calendar by Kennedy. And on it, it had the dates of the Cuban Missile Crisis highlighted in bold. And when he gave it to him, he said, we won. Don't ever tell anybody we won, but we know we won. And that was, he kept that on his desk, basically a memento of the 7 days that they were almost obliterated.
Pretty crazy. I don't know if anyone won. I guess we all won in a way, but
they got we all won in the end. They got the missiles out of Cuba, which was what they wanted.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. And then another thing, just to touch on, we talked about it a little bit, but the civil rights movement. Everyone's heard of the Montgomery bus boycott and segregated lunch counters and that type of thing. This was going on, ever since slavery, but this is a period where people were protesting, and there's Martin Luther King as emergent figure here, Rosa Parks, and that. So just to understand that's that civil rights. To understand that context is that people were really pushing for just better civil rights, particularly for African American people, but also, just like women, poor people, everything like that. There's definitely a view of like criticizing society and saying like, we can do better than this, right?
It was definitely a society in a period of a lot of internal conflict and change. Or rather, I think America always has been that. In a way, it's a society at conflict with its own values, where on the one hand, it's a society for the people and by the people, against tyranny and all that by its original documents. But then you look at its actual history and you see that it's exactly what it claims to hate.
There's a little bit of tyranny in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple instances of tyranny is what you'd write on their report card if you were their grade 7 teacher. I don't know. Anyways,
I'd say there were a couple of rampages if I was their grade 7 teacher.
For sure, anyways. Yeah. They might need some special help. They might need some special attention. They might have anger issues or something like that.
I think that mostly covers the historical context.
There's the election. The election is approaching, right? So Kennedy, when this happens, and this is something that I didn't really think about, right, until I started researching this, is that the election is right on the cusp. So 1964 is when the election's supposed to happen, and that would have been, if Kennedy won that, he would have won a second term as president. And it's important because that's why he was in Dallas. He wouldn't have been in Dallas otherwise. They didn't like him in Dallas. So he had to go there just because Texas is such a big state. They have a lot. See, we're not going to get into it too much. Just if you win Texas, that makes I don't want to say electoral college, but I'll say
a lot of points in the electoral college.
I'll say electoral college.
And I think that it's worth mentioning that it was very likely that Kennedy would have won that election. His first election campaign was unprecedented. Nobody had ever run a campaign with TV ads and song jingles. And, it was mass media on a scale that American politics had never seen before.
That's true. It was a big thing, like between him and Nixon, right? That
Yeah.
now, yeah, it's all of a sudden that it mattered so much, like what you looked like on TV and how you presented yourself, right? You couldn't.
And Nixon did so horribly at that.
No one ever said Nixon was great at presenting himself. That's something that
he's the only person I've ever seen whose lips could sweat.
Yeah. And the cameras back then were very low res, and the fact that they were able to pick up his lip sweat is it's incredible. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about Lee Harvey Oswald, if you're down with that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, okay, awesome.
So he was the youngest of a few children. His father died before he was born, and his mother ended up sending most of his siblings off to an orphanage because she couldn't take care of them. Eventually she ended up sending him off to the orphanage for a few years and then taking him back. Mm-hmm. He was somebody who did well at things when he started. For example, he did well at the Marines for the first few months, but eventually he seemed to find things that he wasn't okay with. He seemed to define himself in opposition to authority. Mm-hmm. Seemed to be a huge part of his personality.
Yeah, he definitely had like a contrarian thing going on, a contrarian streak, I would say, for sure, and some type of like persecution, like superiority complex. You know how that always is, like the biggest dicks that like they somehow simultaneously believe that they're superior and inferior at the same time. Like, I don't know why, but this contradiction like rings very true to me, and I don't know if that's the case with you. But
no, I kind of understand, because it's something that I see in the world often. And I mean, like, the honest to God truth is that all of these things come in degrees and not binary, and there's a little bit of all of these things in all of us. There's a little bit of narcissism in all of us. There's a little bit of lack of ego in all of us. There's a little bit of all of these things, but it's all in degrees. Some people have very little and some people have a lot. Mm-hmm. He happened to fit into the categories that you're talking about a lot. And I think that it comes from living a life where he didn't really ever feel like he belonged or that anybody cared about him, right? Like his mother didn't seem to care about him that much. He never really knew his father. He didn't have any kind of like fully functioning together family unit. Not that any family unit is fully functioning, rather, but
certainly not.
He didn't live a typical life that way, and he very much lived his life alone. In his youth, he would skip school often to learn the New York subway or just walk around town. And so I think that he definitely had this kind of like massive outsider complex where he thought he was smarter than everybody else and that he knew better, but he also probably felt that he wasn't good enough for them because nobody really ever accepted him or loved him.
Yeah, it's that thing of like, well, I don't want to hang out with you guys anyways, right? Like you
exactly.
You want to be one of the cool kids and you're not. And I think that he developed his identity out of this, right? And you know, we can only say
in
so much.
In opposition to things that hurt him.
Yeah, we never met the guy, but I'm just saying, like, from what I read about him and from, just the people that I know in my life, like, I can see parts of Lee Harvey Oswald in people that I know, and, I'd hate to admit it, but in myself as well. And, I think
I'd be lying if I didn't say that.
Yeah, and I like to think of myself as more of a Kennedy-esque figure.
I can understand that, I guess.
Thank you, Deven. I appreciate that.
I think that, if you're only picking the two, then you're more like Kennedy. But I don't think you're. I think that there's probably other people that you're a bit more like.
Okay, that's fair. Am I a Jack Ruby? No, I'm just kidding. Anyways,
no, I don't think so.
So far I own 0 strip clubs. So
I think maybe you could be like a Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay, sure. He got way into guns and stuff like that. He was a violent person. There's like history of domestic violence in his life for sure. Like hitting or getting like confrontational with people in his life. Yeah, man, the whole like not
He
having.
went through phases where he beat his wife often
For
and
sure, for
violently.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And this was even in his youth though, like family friends and stuff like that. He would
Oh,
get
really?
physical
Okay.
with. Yeah, for sure. And you know, just his mother Marguerite, yeah, like just it must suck putting him in the orphanage and that, and then immediately pulling him out and moving him around all the time. Like he moved constantly,
Yeah.
right? He was never in one
Yeah.
place. Eventually he drops out of high school. Yeah, becomes super into communism and stuff like that as well, which is interesting in this period. Communism is one of the most hated things. It still is for some reason. I mean, now it's just like whatever, but people still will be like, "Oh, I hate communism" or "I hate
I think
socialism."
we
So
we need to make the separation between communism and Stalinism, Leninism.
yeah,
You know what I mean? There's an idea and then there's an application.
well, we don't have like 2 hours of podcast for that, but
Yeah, I don't want to get into that right now. But anyways,
yeah, we can do that another time. Getting into just later on in his life, right after the high school stuff. This is paradoxical that he joins the Marines to me, in a way, right?
it's interesting because he seems to have a problem with authority and with society, but then he also seems to like the idea of being part of military or paramilitary organizations. He was part of a youth Air Force auxiliary in high school before he was in the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after the Marines, he defected to the Soviets and he wanted to be some sort of like important intelligent source of information for them. But
Mm-hmm.
he just seemed to be looking for a way to be exceptional, and I think he may have seen the Marines as a way to do that.
For sure, it definitely has something to do with his brother joining the Marines as well, like the
Yeah,
like younger brother syndrome, you know. So
it's funny that you mentioned the violence, because now that I think about it, he was discharged from the Marines after, I believe, challenging a sergeant to a fight over something he disagreed with.
he was that, and shooting himself in the arm accidentally in the barracks with an unregistered civilian weapon. Do you know that?
I knew that there was a civilian weapon involved. I didn't know he shot himself.
Yeah, he shot himself in the arm accidentally, apparently.
Oh, what a moron. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, he is a moron. Yeah, but a moron who, interestingly, was pretty damn good at shooting rifles. He was a trained marksman by the Marine Corps, and people will...
Consistently tested well.
Oh, yeah. And this is a big sticking point, right? People who are into the conspiracy theory stuff, which we've been able to kind of stay away from so far, which I actually like. They'll debate that and say, oh, he was a crappy shot, or, oh, his gun wasn't good, or whatever, or he didn't know how to use that type of gun. Just so many different things, but you can't deny, like, this is one of the things where the truth is on paper, right? Like, he shot guns well when he was in the military. He never achieved the rank of like sharpshooter or the classification of sharpshooter, but he was.
But he did well enough.
He was a marksman, yeah, and he was like above average. As a rifleman. So,
yep. I actually watched interviews with a novelist who interviewed his wife, because his wife declined to be interviewed. But this novelist interviewed his wife, and she wrote a book. And she said that his wife told her that in the days before the assassination, he would spend time, or in the weeks before the assassination, rather, he would just spend time with the rifle, just practicing opening and closing the bolt again, over and over again for hours.
Yeah, which you need to do between shots on that type of rifle.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it stands to reason that he could definitely have made all those shots, no doubt.
For sure, yeah. And this is a good thing, because Deven and I both are from Timmins, so we have shotguns.
Oh yeah, I've shot guns a lot. I own 3 or 4.
Yeah, he's Deven, and not only is our resident history expert, but a bit of a gun guy as well. So in a good way,
Yeah,
in a responsible way.
Thank you.
And the whole thing around the Marines as well, he did have some access to stuff related to spy planes, but not really. He did a little bit of like air traffic control type of stuff, but people will point to his time in the Marines and say, oh, this is where he got recruited by the CIA. There's not much evidence for that, I don't think.
I don't think so either. So here's the thing. I'd be willing to believe it, but I wouldn't be willing to say that it's the theory that I'm pushing. unless there was evidence. Now, was the opportunity there? Sure, but I don't want to speculate because honestly, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just not very pertinent to the story that we happen to be telling right now.
It's not where I want to go today.
Yeah.
At the very least.
There's many more interesting things to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, after getting his 2 court-martials for starting a fight with a sergeant and shooting himself in the arm like an idiot, he got ultimately was able to get out of the Marines with a hardship discharge to take care of his sick mother. So of course, after he gets this discharge, he does what, Deven?
He defects to Russia.
As all of us do, right? As you would naturally.
That's what I do when my mom is sick. I just run for the hills.
You just head straight to Russia, eh?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that's an interesting thing to think about. Was it harder to go to Russia back then or now? I'm not sure, but
well, it would be that depends on what your definition of harder is.
Yeah.
So look at it this way: he had to. As a known socialist, he had to make sure that he had enough money to be able to get there. He had to be able to, get on the plane and then go to Russia and then have them accept him. He actually went, I think, from America to France to Britain and then to Finland and then to Russia.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it was the height of the Cold War. You couldn't just get on a plane in Florida and then go to Moscow, right?
That's hilarious. Yeah.
And then, of course, the Russians, when you got to the border, would see your passport and then not just be like, "Oh yeah, you're an American. What, are you here on vacation? Yeah, sure. Come on in.
Come on in.
Go look around.
Do you want to see our nuclear enrichment sites?"
Yeah, exactly. Would you like a tour guide?
Yeah, for sure, man. That's interesting.
So he, and not only so I think he said that he had saved up $1,000, but his bank records at the time indicated that he only had about $200. That doesn't mean that he didn't have the $1,000, but either way, those were the obstacles, right? The political obstacles, the financial obstacles. As for now, I think it would cost a lot more money relative to income speaking, but there'd be a lot less barriers from going to Russia. You could just show up at the border and say, "Yeah, I'm here for a vacation."
Yeah, interesting, man. Yeah, just the details again, right? When you get into the details, you're like, "Oh, there's so much more story here." So
it wasn't on a whim, right? He had to have planned.
Yes, for sure. Which is weird. It's all weird. He's a weird dude. Anyways, so he went to the Soviet Union. He publicly denounced America, but he never actually gave up his citizenship. Right? He made a big show of it, being like, "Oh,
threatened to renounce his passport and citizenship."
Yes, but never actually does it. He's never granted Soviet citizenship, and just like everywhere else in his life. Other than maybe the Marines, he seemed to have kind of done decently in the Marines. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, he got to shoot guns, and he liked that. But in the Soviet Union, he was just a factory worker, man.
He never wanted to be. He never wanted to be average or run of the mill. He was never going to be happy as a factory worker. He was looking to be exceptional.
Yeah, for sure. So he actually married a Russian woman, Marina. Priskova, I'm probably saying that wrong. Masha's not here, my Russian wife, to help me with my Russian. Prusakova, maybe? Prusakova,
probably.
Anyways, so they only dated for 6 weeks before they got married. And Marina wasn't his first choice. He was into a few other girls, but because he got rejected by them, he ended up with Brita.
So that must have made her feel real special.
Oh yeah, well he continued to make her feel real great throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah, he really wasn't a very great guy in a lot of ways.
And the Russian government, they didn't like him at all. He was a burden to them. I don't know why they let him in the country in the first place. Maybe they thought that he could be some type of asset, but by the time he was in there and settled in, they realized that he was a bit of a piece of shit. They wanted to get rid of him. And a way that he was actually able to stay in Russia is by attempting suicide.
Yes, they found him in a bathtub with his wrists slit, and he got admitted to a psych ward.
Yeah,
and through that, he was allowed to stay for a while.
Yeah, and they didn't want this to become like a big incident, right? Like some type of weird thing where maybe then the Russians spin it and say they tried to kill our citizen in their country or something like that, right? They didn't want.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Yeah, so he gets to keep living in Russia. He has a daughter, June, with Marina. He's again, hot tempered, beats Marina, terrible domestic violence type of stuff going on with that. Like she has a hard life, man. Like I don't feel
Feel bad for her, yeah.
yeah, like that's just terrible, really, in every way. Um, and eventually, he does leave the Soviet Union and return to America because you know what? He didn't get there and become that socialist hero, right? He thought
Yeah,
he'd get there and
exactly.
they'd treat him like he's Vladimir fucking Lenin. Well, guess what? You're not.
It's interesting that his ideology went to socialism because,
Yeah,
like, in socialism, almost inherently, like, there's a lot less of an idea of heroism because everybody's, part of a wheel in the machine, right?
yeah, true.
So this idea of self exceptionalism and socialism almost clash in
It's
him.
true. That is true. Yeah. Yeah, just another thing that makes him kind of difficult to wrap your head around, but in a way that like a lot of real life people are. So, anyways,
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody's psyche is
yeah,
simple and straightforward, right? Like
yeah,
nobody's life is a storybook that can really be read out in a clean narrative that everybody could understand.
for sure.
Some events are so complex and so internal that you can't really understand what's going on inside somebody.
Yeah, but there's definitely a through line of like being a dickhead.
Oh yeah, definitely, no doubt, no doubt.
strong, strong
I was just
dickhead
speaking to the
through
complexity
line.
of personality. That's all.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Yeah. So back in America, he's no less or no more exceptional than he was in the Soviet Union. He has normal jobs. He works at for interesting for this podcast, he works for a photography and design firm. Did you know that?
Yeah, yes, I did actually.
Jaggers Chili's Stovall, and this is actually where he is able to get that access to equipment to make his fake ID, which he used to order his rifle from American Rifleman, which is a magazine. So he actually got a coupon from American Rifleman.
Such casual access to weapons is terrifying.
That's America, dude.
Yeah, we won't get into it.
And this is when he starts using his there's so many opportunities in this podcast to get derailed, but we're doing a great job of not giving in. And this is where he takes on that assumed name, Alec Cadell, right? So he has that
Yeah,
fake ID. People say it's a passport. It's not a passport. I think it is a fake military ID, I believe.
yeah.
Okay, so
So
just kind of clarify that. 7 months before the attempt on JFK, he actually got got mixed up in an assassination attempt on Edwin Walker. Do you know anything about this?
yeah, so Edwin Walker was he was an anti-leftist
Mm-hmm.
like politician, but he did this like it personally in his spare time. He was an activist against the left, specifically against communism and Castro and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And Oswald saw him as kind of an embodiment of the worst parts of far right politics. He saw him as a modern Hitler, and he set out to assassinate him. He did shoot him, but he did not kill him. The photo that we're talking about and looking at today was actually taken shortly before he shot Walker.
Yeah. So maybe it was more bragging about that than the Kennedy thing. Interesting.
A little
Yeah.
bit, yeah.
It makes a lot more sense to me that he would attempt to kill Walker over Kennedy, right? If you're just thinking like, if you are thinking, oh, it's ideologically motivated, right? This
It's
is a
my
guy.
understanding that socialists at the time in America were upset with Kennedy for the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion and for not supporting Castro or for the embargo and stuff rather than what they had done.
But obviously, this guy who's a public segregationist and publicly, saying that we should take the civil rights away from communists, and
Oh yeah,
yeah,
totally an embodiment of what Oswald hates, and that makes sense.
for sure.
I don't know why he didn't go back for him.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he like just was a bit of a coward. He took his shot, he missed, and he went home, right?
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
So, anyways, the fair play for Cuba, I do think that this is an interesting thing. You brought it up earlier. Something that maybe hints towards Oswald's motivations. Definitely part of just the web of events and kind of the web of confusion surrounding this whole thing. It was a pro-Castro organization. He it's such a weird thing. So he was like the only person. Like Fair Play for Cuba is like a bigger organization, maybe a U.S. wide. He was the only member of the New Orleans branch, though.
That's because New Orleans was like very, very Cuban at the time. A lot of anti-Castro Cubans. It was not a very socialist town.
For sure, but you think you'd be able to find one or two other people, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
Like even bronies have like whole conventions, Deven. So like
that's
this guy,
fair. Maybe he was off-putting to people who wanted to join the movement.
He must have been, right? Like even people who agreed with him politically must have just been unable to deal with him, right? And
well, if somebody with that kind of psychological exceptionalism would probably insist on being in charge.
True, yeah, and maybe not take other people's opinions and things, and that can, I don't know, just antisocial. Yeah, you can see that he's at this point like very disillusioned with the USSR. He's still seeking some type of identity, seeking roots somewhere, right? And then he turns to Cuba. So the USSR didn't turn out to be a socialist paradise, but obviously Cuba is.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like he's clinging to something. Like he's always looking for something.
He seems to want to be part of some revolution somehow.
For sure. But no revolution wants him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's doesn't really do well in Russia. He's turned away from Cuba, and then here he is in the United States, sitting around, disillusioned with everything and everyone, and looking for a way to be important, to matter.
For sure. There's the 6-day visit to Mexico City. This is really wrapped in with the conspiracy theory stuff. Another like weird wrinkle in this case. This is like right before the assassination of Kennedy. He goes to, I think, like a month before or something like that, maybe a few months before. He goes to Mexico City. He visits the Cuban and Soviet embassies. There's proof that he was there. Photos and documented evidence. Yeah. I mean, unless you're gonna get really crazy with it and say, oh, it's a body double or like you can just go completely nuts if you want to, right? Or
that's not where I would go with the conspiracy theories.
No, this either shows two things. It shows one of two things. It shows that he was supported by these embassies or that he wasn't.
Yeah, and it clearly shows to me that he wasn't because, he applied for entry into Cuba and they said no.
Right. So it kind of hints more towards that he was trying to, he wanted to do some type of big political violent thing. He was trying to get support and basically got rejected again. That's how I view this as well, right? It sounds real conspiracy theory though, right? When you hear it, initially you're like, oh wow, this is crazy, but maybe not.
Anything that can raise questions, I think, in those cases is really what drives it. Unanswered questions or questions raised, but either way.
For sure. So this is another kind of crazy coincidental thing. 1 month before the assassination is when he gets his job at the Texas School Book Depository. And it is from the 6th floor that those shots will be fired. So that's pretty nuts.
Yeah, for sure. And that doesn't seem coincidental at all. Although I don't know when people would have known that Kennedy was coming. Maybe if it was that far in advance, I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I don't think the parade route had been planned by that point.
So it really just turned out in his favor. Interesting.
Yeah, weird. Like this is where like the fate kind of thing comes in. It's very, very interesting story. There's the Buell Frazier thing. Buell Frazier was a coworker of his, and Buell drove him around to pick up some quote curtain rods. So he got those curtain rods. I think he was living in like a board house, and Marina was living somewhere else with some.
Yeah, she was living in a different city. He would sometimes, if she would let him, go and visit her and their daughter. And he was trying to convince them to move with him. And he would say, if you'll come to live with me, I'll get an apartment. But he was just living in this boarding house, mostly working.
Right.
at
Yeah.
the book depository.
Yeah, for sure. Organizing books or whatever, I guess. So this leads us to the big day. In 1963, November the 22nd, right?
Yeah.
Where Kennedy's killed. He is in Texas, as we said, campaigning essentially, trying to win the election, and basically his motorcade is riding through is it Dealey Plaza?
I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yep. And he unfortunately takes 3 bullets, reportedly from a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, and one of those bullets is to the head, and not a lot of people walk away from a rifle shot to the head, and unfortunately
Definitely not. It does happen,
Yeah.
but he also sustained one to the throat.
And one to the back as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so,
that one to the head is probably what did it.
for sure. And he obviously ends up succumbing to these injuries, dying from these injuries. Oswald himself goes on the run right away. He kills another person, a police officer, J.D. Tippit, when J.D. Tippit tries to arrest him. And then after Oswald is brought into police custody, he's killed by the strip club owner that we alluded to earlier,
Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby, who was another character, honestly, like a mirror image of Oswald in a lot of ways, man.
Very, very similar. Very similar in his complex and personality, just on the other side of the fence politically.
For sure, but yeah, similar in his
belief in his own exceptionalism.
Yeah, and his personality and the fact that he was failing a lot in life, right? He owned stakes in some strip clubs, but he was never like making actual money. He was never doing well. He was one of these guys that hang out with police all the time, so maybe I don't have to say anything more than that. And he was under the same misconception. It's such an interesting thing to me. He was under the same misconception as Oswald, where essentially thinking that in order to become a great man in history, all you have to do is some type of political violence, right? If you kill somebody, all of a sudden you'll be celebrated as a hero. Oswald thought the same thing, I think. Like, he probably thought, I mean, in America, he was obviously going to be hated, but maybe he thought that the Soviet Union or Cuba or somebody else would think that he was a hero for what he did, right?
Yeah, or that he thought he would trigger some kind of larger movement.
For sure, that he would change history for the better, but he certainly didn't do that.
Yeah.
So anyways, and Jack Ruby similarly was thinking that he would be celebrated, right, for what he did. So so we can get into the actual backyard photo, because that's kind of the story of Oswald right there. You ready to do that?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the backyard photo. It's one of the most famous photos of Lee Harvey Oswald, probably other than his mugshot. If you want to see the photo, it's going to be up on our Instagram. If you search like Lee Harvey Oswald backyard photo, I'm sure it will come up, but try to look for the original one. That's kind of an important sticking point. But anyway, Deven, when you look at this photo, can you describe the photo to us, what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, like, maybe this is just my kind of small town backcountry upbringing, but at first glance, it seems like a fairly harmless photo of a guy holding a rifle. There's photos of me doing the same thing. But what you're seeing here is Lee Harvey Oswald dressed up all in black. He has his rifle, and if you see on his belt, he also has a revolver. And this is him kind of dressed up in preparation for his assassination of Walker. He had sneaked up on his wife as she was working in the backyard in an effort to show her his getup. And she turned around and she found his getup funny, and she went to get a camera and took a picture. I believe he's holding 2 communist periodicals or socialist periodicals in his hand as well. It's almost as if he was like filing a photo for evidence. I mean, this photo isn't really proof of anything, really, other than that he owned this gun. But it was used kind of it was used in the public trial kind of as evidence that, you know, he had the motives and the means and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
I mean, it is the exact make of rifle, right? That was
It
used to
is,
kill
yeah,
the
for
president.
sure.
So
No, yeah, so it proves that he owned the exact make of rifle. I'm
yeah.
not saying that I don't think he did it, because I think he did. I'm just saying that if I were his lawyer, I would say
Oh,
that it's not proof of pulling a trigger.
oh, for sure. Just this photo is
It's circumstantial.
no, it's evidence of nothing except that he was a cosplayer, Comic-Con boy.
Yeah, he just really wanted to be a revolutionary, but he's kind of missing the long sleeve collared button up shirt. Like, you need the Castro look.
Yeah, yeah, he doesn't scream like cool person who's cool revolutionary changing everything.
Well, you
No.
need bravado. That's why it's always South Americans, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got no tan, no beard, it's just not the type of guy that any
No
communist wants to
Slavic.
follow.
Yeah.
The newspaper he's holding, just for those who are interested, it's two newspapers, The Militant and The Worker. And the rifle that he's holding is a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, 6.5 millimeter slugs, I guess, is what it takes. A lot of people miss this, but he does also have that 38 special revolver, I guess, on his waist. Yeah. The photos, there's actually, so the most famous one, it's the one that was on Time magazine. It's called CE133A. And it was, published on the cover of Time magazine in 1954. It's one of a set of photos, I believe 3 photos that were taken by Marina. And these were recovered by the police when they raided his house after the shooting. Yeah, there's like a big sticking point around this with the photo being edited and the sights on the rifle. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I think I originally had this wrong, but at some point, I thought it was Time magazine, but at some point somebody published the photo with the rifle removed. They said for making the photo a little bit more easy to look at or something like that. I didn't really understand the justification fully.
Yeah, I guess
but either way, it just seems to have muddied up the narrative, essentially.
Yeah,
it just makes more confusion around the whole issue.
Yeah, I don't believe that it was Life magazine, which I think is what
Life,
Time magazine was called at the time,
yeah.
maybe even. Anyways,
okay, got you.
Yeah, but that's okay. I think it was actually other like less reputable outlets, but yeah, they removed the site from the rifle, so kind of a problem. Just don't don't do that. If it's like an important
definitely.
historical photo, I wouldn't say that like going ahead and editing it however you feel is a good idea. So yeah, it's actually been disputed whether or not the photo is authentic by Oswald himself. He actually said that it was fake, and he said that they had taken, like, when he was doing his I'm a patsy rant, he said that they had actually taken like someone else's like body and like pasted his face on it basically or whatever.
He seemed to enjoy intentionally misleading people himself.
Yeah,
honestly. So I think that it would make sense that he would say that, because honestly, he just seemed to be trying to derail the whole effort once he had done what he had done. You know what I mean? What do you call them when they interview him at the police station? He's calmly and coolly maintaining his innocence.
Yeah, trying to play it off, but
exactly.
From a lot of the people who commented on like his demeanor and stuff, it was basically that he like felt like a crazy person. Maybe once he got arrested by the police, he chilled out a bit, but
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But a lot of people, in terms of like the authenticity of this photo, quite a few pretty reputable people have gone ahead and looked into this. The House Committee on Assassinations, which was formed to basically look at like JFK and Martin Luther King and other prominent political figures that were assassinated. They looked into the authenticity of this, found that it was real. There's this Dartmouth College report. So I think that this is a super important thing to talk about. In 2015, and they confirmed the authenticity of the photo. So this is what that actual YouTube video that I sent you is about, the Vox one. They interviewed the head of the study, Hani Farid. And he works in digital imaging forensics, which is basically the perfect person to address something like this. His whole job is basically determining if an image is authentic when it comes to like the commission of a crime, right? So if someone has a photo and they're like, "Oh, Deven, I have this photo of you murdering Winnie the Pooh with a butcher knife." And
I did it with a pipe, actually.
Okay. Well, we also have these pictures of you eating honey menacingly. So so that's a lot of evidence, right? So if someone wanted to come with that evidence, then Hani Farid
that would have to be examined,
or someone like him would look into that, right? So there's quite a few different things that have been pointed at in terms of basically places where people look and say, okay, this is fake. There's the shadows, the broad chin, the length of the gun, and the fact that he's doing like a quote impossible pose, right? And basically like going through every single one of these, what they did to kind of determine it. The shadows, like the shadows on his face not matching the photo, or the shadows on the ground. You can actually look at that. That's basically just like the fact of the time of day that it was, and they've recreated this photo. They literally went back to that same spot in the backyard, same time of day, and this was done I think in the 70s to collect that evidence,
and the shadows matched up.
And the shadows they make perfect sense, right?
And as somebody who's held guns often, I don't consider that pose impossible. If you've never held a gun, or if you haven't held one often, you may not consider the weight of a gun, and also how much leverage it exerts when you're holding it like that, because it's long. You know what I mean? So the gun kind of counterbalances. It changes the way you hold yourself, the way you stand and stuff.
For sure, yeah. The broad chin thing, like he was saying, Oswald himself was saying that, oh, it doesn't, that's not my chin, like my chin doesn't look like that. Again, it's just how the shadows are falling on his face. It's something that was simply proven by taking photos in that exact same location at the exact same time of day.
Which is like the best form of research for this sort of thing.
For sure. There's also like the 3D model thing that supports this, but we'll talk about that when we get into the fourth point. The length of the gun, that's another thing that's been disputed, but literally just like because of the angle of the photo and everything, like maybe it looks like the gun's a little too short or whatever, but they have a lot of other photos of the rifle. The exact rifle used to kill Kennedy that was recovered from the book depository. They're able to compare that to this rifle. They have tons and tons of reference for this, and you can pretty conclusively prove that that's it by comparing it to the other photos of the rifle and measuring the rifle itself. The impossible pose thing, so the 3D model thing that they did was very interesting. Basically, they created like a lighting and physics sim so that you could have like a simulated person and like the actual like physics, the weight of everything makes sense, and they can try out these poses and see if they actually work, and would they be casting exact shadows like that within like the lighting engine that they've created. A kind of weird backward way of going about it with technology, but I think it is cool, and it does like add an extra level to the whole thing of analysis and of proof,
like verification, essentially.
That this is real.
It's another filter to put it through,
for sure. I think that if you look at all of that together with the fact that these, Marina herself said that she took the photos.
Exactly.
There's also like the unique scratch marks that particular camera, the Imperial 620 dual lens camera. It's a plastic film camera with a waist level viewfinder. If anyone's interested, you can buy one for like super cheap. You can probably buy one for like $40 now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they actually had that camera. They were able to recover it. They put film in and took photos, and they were all showing the same scratch marks, right? That have that.
When you say they recovered it, you mean the actual camera?
The actual camera, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so they were able to, pretty conclusively prove that this camera leaves certain marks on the negatives.
Yeah.
And the marks matched exactly these photos of Oswald.
Are we talking about some of these kind of For example, these tiny little white scratches on his legs.
Yeah, the white scratches on his legs. If you're looking at like the full resolution photo, there's kind of scratches all around the edge and stuff like that too. There's
Yeah,
apparently
okay.
11 unique like scratches that they can look at and say like we've reproduced these on these negatives to prove it,
Okay.
which is very very interesting and pretty damn conclusive. Like they've pretty
It's incredible how much time and effort has been put into this.
Yeah, and it's just one small thing, but it's really helpful for this podcast because we needed something photography. We need something photography related, and yeah, just like what you were saying, in regard to people's just overconfidence in their ability to look at a photo and say it's real. This is the thing with the moon landing stuff too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, there's so many factors to consider when you look at these things, right? Like, people look at a picture and they think they're seeing like a perfect reproduction of what was happening, but what they're seeing was the camera's limited angle and its ability to reproduce an image that it was seeing.
For sure.
Like there's a stage in between sometimes that people don't understand, especially with cameras. There's also just so many little details in pictures that it's really hard for most people's brains to catch it all and to collate it all.
Yeah, and we're more used to like looking at the real world, right? And not like photos of the world. And we assume that photos of the world are going to reflect that. But it so many different things determine it, like the amount of exposure that you're using, how wide the shot is, like in terms of how much it's going to distort the image and things like that. Lots going on. So
yeah, exactly. In the case of the camera you're talking about, like literally the way the camera worked mechanically, leaving the scratches,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots to look at that you don't really think of intuitively, right? So, yeah, that's why universities are important, I guess. someone can spend their whole life doing this, right?
Yeah, if only we could get everybody to go to one.
Yeah, they need to make it cheaper and stuff. But again, that's a completely.
Oh yeah, let's not get down that road.
But yeah, just to sum this up, man. This has been an awesome episode. Hopefully, it lives up to expectations. It's a huge topic, something that a lot of people feel very strongly about. And yeah, I think we did it justice, or at least like we started
got everything we needed. Yeah.
For this part,
we got like an hour and a half of stuff. So okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a long episode. We're gonna keep going though. This will probably be like a 3 or maybe 4-part series. The next part will be on JFK. I do want to give him the respect of an entire episode, so we're gonna cover JFK. But do you want to kind of sum up like your big picture conclusions, big picture epiphanies that you've had researching like Oswald and the assassination?
Yeah, sure. I think as I've researched Oswald and the assassination for this episode, the more I've looked at it, the more I've kind of realized that like Oswald was perfectly capable of doing it on his own, and B, I mean that physically and psychologically. But I don't think that is mutually exclusive with the idea that it was part of something larger.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the picture for me, I see, if I try to leave out what I know about him, I see an average guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the first thing that I saw when I looked at the picture. And I think that's my overall impression of the man, which was exactly what his problem was that he couldn't reconcile himself with that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that even if he wasn't the only person there, like even not the only person that took shots, the only person that was conspiring against Kennedy, I do think that he was there. I think he fired shots. You can
he was the one that did the deed.
For sure. And in that way, he really changed history for the worst, right? Like you were saying, he was an average person. I think that this does show that like average jerks can change history. Just maybe not in the way
on a whim, basically.
Yeah, and maybe not the way that they expect, right? And
yeah,
there's a big lesson here in terms of, just like, I don't know, it's a cautionary tale. People aren't going to celebrate you just because you kill somebody. That's, I guess,
it's a cautionary tale in so many ways. Yeah. I'd say it's a cautionary tale about having longer courtships. I feel bad for his wife.
Cautionary tale for Marina here, eh?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Always date somebody longer before you get engaged to them.
Just because he has an apartment, that doesn't mean,
Well, in Soviet Russia, everybody has an apartment. Apartment has you.
he had kind of a nice one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it had him as well. But yeah, I mean, was he really driven by ideology? I think we've kind of talked around that. I'm not 100%
A little
sure.
bit, yeah.
I think a little bit, but I also think that he was more driven by just like his own
personal desire for some sort of relevance.
Yeah, his own personal weakness, I think.
Yeah, he wanted people to know him and remember him.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff here about like just, you know, big picture topics like fate, as you said, like the book depository thing, like getting a job there a month before, even probably before the parade route was even scheduled. Like there's crazy things like that. And there's also stuff of just like the motion of history, right? Like maybe this was going to happen anyway. There were so many people conspiring, like not conspiring, but there are a lot of people who were, you know, adverse to John F. Kennedy, right? There was things that John F. Kennedy that was doing that were going to make people hate him and try to kill him, I think.
So many people, which is why it's easy for people to believe that there was some conspiracy against him. But this also begs the question, right? What if there had been another parade a week before with some other political figure?
Yeah.
Would Lee Harvey Oswald have shot them instead?
Maybe.
Honestly, because it seemed to me he would have shot anybody to get the relevance he was looking for.
Yeah, maybe. It's definitely...
It's all supposition. Dangerous hobby.
Yeah. Dangerous hobby, trying to assassinate political figures?
No. Supposition's a dangerous hobby.
Oh, okay.
No, assassinate political leaders all you want. That's cool.
Yeah, I think what we really learned was don't go to the library. If you go to the library, you will become a communist and you will try to kill the president.
You will become radicalized if you educate yourself.
Yeah, so, you know, just
stay away from books.
And don't listen to this podcast, that's for sure. Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah, that's the episode. It was awesome. Before we get out of here, I just want to let you guys know you can tell your friends about the podcast. It's a great way of helping the podcast grow. You can find us on Instagram, photo_friends_pod, and you can support our sponsor, CloudSpot. You can get 50% off now. Link in the description. First 12 months. Deven, can you tell the people where they can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Deven Kay Painting. It's DevenKay Painting. And you can see some of my art there, and there's some history things to come in the future. Awesome.
Thank you again, Deven. Thank you,
Jen.
Thank you, Deven. And
we're not doing this right now.
And thanks to our listeners. And before we get out of here, Mr. What do you call yourself? Kenny Ketchup.
Ketchup Ken, yeah. Or
Ketchup,
like that.
Ketchup
I should have
Ken.
gone with Juicy Jumbo.
Juicy Jumbo. You've got the last word. Something random.
Something random? Okay. Ottoman.
Perfect.
Yeah, beautiful.